When I was a college student, I volunteered for an alternative spring break trip one spring, and went to the Cherokee Nation just outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. There I volunteered at a Head Start program for little children on the reservation. One boy in particular, I'll call him Johnny, was having a particularly tough day, crying out, throwing things at people, having a number of consecutive tantrums. He was exhausted and inexhaustible, as 2-year-olds can be sometimes. Things became so bad for little Johnny that they asked us to leave the building. They said that little Johnny's father had recently left home again, and having two male volunteers in the room was not particularly helpful to the all-female staff that day. I'd volunteered with another man from another church, from another part of the country, and as we walked out of the room that day, he said of little Johnny, "Boy, I bet that kid's going to jail someday." It was such a shocking, awful line. I'd love to tell you that little Johnny invented a life-saving device or became a great poet, but I have no idea. What makes us so sad about that line, judging by the few facts we have, what cuts to the core, what cuts to the quick in that story is not a lack of optimism, but the theft of hope, the outright stealing of hope. There's nothing crueler than stealing hope from your neighbor. Hope, optimism, not only are they not the same, they're not in the same ballpark, they're barely related to each other. Optimism is what you experience when the sun is shining, when your Cheerios taste particularly good in the morning, when the paper came on time, you just got a raise, and the children cleaned their rooms without being asked. And you say to yourself, it feels like it's gonna be a good day today. I like optimism. I really like optimism. I like an amazing bowl of Cheerios in the morning. I like the quiet. I like looking at my schedule and thinking there's a good amount of enjoyable work to do today. Not too much, but plenty for me to be useful. And that's the problem with optimism. Someone else can take it away, and worse yet, they can take it away without intending to. They didn't mean to steal your optimism, but they can do it anyway. You can have something that we call an accident. It's just an accident. It shouldn't ruin your sense of optimism. It's just an unfortunate event, but that's how flimsy optimism can be for some of us, less steel to the world. Somebody can look at you in a way that's unknown to them, and somehow magically it's a mystery to you too. It's a mystery to both of you. Suddenly, without any kind of warning, that look hits upon your greatest insecurity or reminds you of your greatest tragedy. That's optimism, and it's possible that it's gone. And it's gone now. And for it to come back, you'll need the right amount of sunshine or just the right kind of cereal tomorrow morning to get it back. Hope is different. Hope is what you experience and give away to others, perhaps even, and I say this as positively as I can, that it's something with which you can infect others. It's a renewable resource grounded in the witness of the biblical prophets and the good news of Jesus Christ, who did not come into the world simply because things were going swimmingly and that all were fed and none were malnourished and diseased. But the good news, of course, came to a people oppressed, a people conquered, a people suffering from malnutrition and disease. Even as good food grew around them, food access was a persistent issue that naturally caused vitamin deficiencies. Hope is there when things aren't well. Hope is divine, and to be a hope is to be a Christian, a Christ to others. To be a hope is to sing a doxology, a liturgy of praise, even when you know the data is problematic. We have a phenomenal doxology in Isaiah 35, a beautiful doxology with its desert flowers and a highway for God's people. The only issue with Isaiah 35 is that some folks just think it's in the wrong place. It's not that people don't like it, but just that it doesn't fit with its surroundings, especially when you contrast it with the chapter that immediately precedes the 35th chapter, the 34th. Just listen to the way in which chapter 34 sounds. These verses come right before what we heard this morning. The land is turned to waste. It is awful, it is tragic. Remember, the prophets are poets, and that's important when you hear that the streams of Edom shall be turned into a pitch, and her soil into sulfur. Her land shall become burning pitch. Night and day it shall not be quenched. Its smoke shall go up forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. No one shall pass through it forever and ever. But the hawk and the hedgehog shall possess it. The owl and the raven shall live in it. God shall stretch the line of confusion over it and the plummet of chaos over its nobles. They shall name it No Kingdom There, and all its princes shall be nothing. Thorns shall grow over its strongholds, nettles and thistles in its fortresses. It shall be the haunt of jackals, an abode for ostriches. Wildcats shall meet with hyenas. Goat demons shall call out to each other. My friends, goat demons are calling out to each other. Goat demons calling out to each other is what precedes our reading for today. In the midst of a calamity that has befallen the people, the great exile to Babylon, where figuratively the prophetic imagination is that goat demons call out to each other in this wasteland inhabited by jackals and ostriches called No Kingdom There, the hawks and the hedgehogs seem to be okay, but there's certainly no optimism. The question in front of the prophet is there any hope? And some folks believe that the two chapters sitting next to each other must be a mistake. Two different voices. You can't describe the land being uninhabitable on the one hand and deserts blooming in the next breath. You can't say that the name of the country is going to be known as No Kingdom There, and in the next few lines you're talking about crocus blossoming in abundance. How can one write about things being so bad that goat demons are calling out to each other, and then shortly thereafter say that a highway shall be there and it shall be called the Holy Way? All sorrow and seeing shall flee away. Who does that? Who believes in a vision of desert bloom? Who believes that the most glorious flowers can emerge in Death Valley? Don't we? Don't we in America? Don't we in this nation of ours, who have had and have prophets, who speak out of a similar paradigm as the biblical prophets, don't we have that belief? Isn't Death Valley in America? Most of the pictures on the slides on the screen are from Death Valley. Don't we in America believe in a desert bloom? When Martin Luther King offered the nation, I have a dream, there are bits of that speech that aren't quite as ear-catching or eye-popping as the table of brotherhood and the dream of children being judged by the content of the character rather than the color of their skin. Martin Luther King said in his speech, I'm not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. And then there's the line I never got in school. I bet they teach it in some schools, but maybe not all the schools, because I never got the line. It's right there in the middle of his speech. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. It's right there, right as King is winding his way up to his dream of the table of brotherhood on the red hills of Georgia and his 4 little children and the valleys being exalted and the hills being made low. It's language straight from the prophets and the Psalms, our national dream, one of our finest hours as a nation, a speech that isn't just taught in the United States but in Germany and Japan and Australia too. Not even one tiny bit of optimism, but drenched in hope. Why is it hope? Because it is completely unreasonable. It contradicts the facts on the ground. It is a doxology, a hymn of praise, even with the data set that is currently in hand. Hope contradicts what the listener expects to hear and sometimes contradicts what the speaker expects to say. It's a rush of blood, the better self seizing the moment. You've heard that story about the I Have a Dream speech, right? Mahalia Jackson has stood right behind Martin Luther King Jr., and at the beginning of his speech, she calls out to him, Tell them about the dream, Martin. It's not even clear that Martin Luther King was going to say all that he said. The hope was so profound that day that the listener and the speaker both heard something unexpected, and that was an imagining of a reality that was not yet grounded in the here and now. The theologian and poet Amos Wilder once wrote, "Accept no mitigation, but be instructed at the null point. The zero breeds new algebra." The zero breeds new algebra. The prophet, in the midst of the introduction of the zero, a wasteland where jackals and hyenas and goat demons are calling out to each other, the zero is introduced into the new algebraic equations, and in the midst of that declares hope, enacts hope, and is a hope. How can we as Americans and as Christians do anything else other than to declare hope, enact hope, and be a hope when American bombs are dropped on Yemeni children? If that's normal, and it is, if drone strikes that kill innocent children are normal, and they are, if shootings happen in our streets and our schools, and they do, and that's normal, that's accepted, that's part of the fabric of our culture. If polluting our waterways is normal and accepted, and it is. If there are still people in Flint that won't drink the tap water, and there are. If we are still on track to accepting fewer refugees than we have in decades, and we definitely are, we can't wait for hope to come to us. We can't wait to be consumers of hope, looking for just the right price or just the right angle, or waiting for it to be on sale. We can't settle for just a little slice. We can't take a little sliver to tide us over. It can't be a commodity that we treasure for a little while and then put back in the closet. Hope won't just sit on the shelf waiting for us to pick it up. It can't be something just for Sundays, and it can't be something that is separate from the fabric of our souls. Hope has to be our identity, not just be hopeful, not just experience hope from time to time, but to be a hope. To be a hope for our neighbors, for our church, for our community, our schools, our families, our colleagues. To be a hope, to sing a doxology, no matter what the data says. To incorporate the zero into the algebra and to write new equations. To be a hope. And so as we begin this program year, as we start once more, here we are once again, a community that knows that God has given us a vision to thrive, that God gives us a vision to prosper, that God gives us a vision that is built on theological hope, that God will pave the way, a highway, a pilgrim way, where we can see the bloom in the desert, no matter what we're doing, no matter where we are on life's journey. And so I'm going to begin with the choirs this morning. Our choirs, please rise as you are able, and I mean this choir, but also mean our bell choir and any members of the children's choir and the youth choir who are here this morning. Would you please rise as you are able? Choirs, we dedicate you to be a hope for yourselves, for one another, for this community. As you practice and rehearse and play together, we dedicate you to the task of once again leading us in hope. We give thanks that you offer notes when words can't fully capture what we feel, that you capture our imaginations and free us from our burdens. And we dedicate your music to God. Ushers, please join the choirs and rise as you are able. We dedicate you to be a hope for newcomers and older comers. We dedicate you to the ministry of welcoming and hospitality, service and generosity. We dedicate your gifts and your capacity to be a hope to God. Sound technicians, would you please rise as you are able? We dedicate you to be a hope to those who hear well and for those whom hearing can sometimes be a struggle. We dedicate your work to helping us worship God no matter who we are. And to those who belong to committees, ministry teams, task forces, the leadership council, would you please rise as you're able? We dedicate you to be a hope in this uncertain world where no future is promised and varying levels of optimism may be present. Do not fear, for I am with you, says the Lord. May you dream a dream of hope where an algebra that includes a 0 or 2 can be incorporated, but where God's vision will take you to a place where you can be a hope to another. We dedicate you to the task of being a hope. And to all the ministers, and to all the priests, to all God's people, for all God's people are ministers and priests in this world, no matter how young or old, no matter how Christian you are, no matter how faithful you are, would you all, as you are able, please rise in this moment. And let us together dedicate ourselves to be hopes to our neighbors, ministering in the offices of Wall Street and Main Street, in Jersey City and Newark, Montclair and Manhattan, ministering with love and spirit, weaving a vision of hope for our country that dreams a dream of care for any and all, no matter where they were born, no matter what job they hold, no matter what abilities and gifts they may have. We dedicate ourselves to be a hope for one another. And the people say, Amen.